Let me ask you something. When is the last time you were completely alone? No phone, no noise, no one else in the house. And you didn't immediately reach for something to fill the silence. Not scrolling, not turning on the TV, not putting on a podcast or a game, just alone with yourself, with nothing. For most men, that question lands somewhere uncomfortable because the honest answer is it's been a while, maybe a long while, maybe never in the way I'm describing. And if you'd asked that question of me 10 years ago, I would have been one of those men. Not because I was too busy, not because I didn't have time, but because the silence scared me. Not in a way I could have named then, but it scared me. Because when everything went quiet, there was nothing left between me and me. And I didn't want to meet that guy. This episode is about solitude. What it is, what it costs you when you don't have it, and what becomes possible when you finally learn to sit in it. I want to tell you that it changed my life, and I want to be honest enough to tell you exactly how, including the moment I didn't see coming in the most unlikely place that started the whole thing. So here's where we're going today. First, I want to name the cultural problem, because what I'm describing isn't just a personal challenge. Something has shifted in the world around us that is making real solitude harder and harder to find, and most men don't even realize what it's costing them. Second, I want to tell you what solitude actually is. Not the definition, the experience. What happens in your body and your mind when you finally stop running? Third, I want to tell you about a moment in my life where I wasn't trying to be still. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't praying. I was sitting in a bathroom, completely done, completely out of options, and everything changed. And fourth, I want to leave you with one thing to do this week. Not a program, not a habit. One posture, one moment. That's it. Now I'm Kirk Taylor, so let's go. Here's what I want you to understand about the world we're living in right now. We have more access to connection than any generation in human history. The phone in your pocket can put you in contact with millions of people in seconds. Dating apps, social media, group chats, notification after notification after notification. We are never technically alone, and yet we are lonelier, more disconnected, more isolated in the ways that actually matter. More access, less connection. That is the paradox we're living in. And here is what I think is happening underneath that most men are not learning to be with themselves. They're surrounded by noise, by options, by distraction, and none of it is teaching them the thing that actually builds a man, which is the ability to sit alone in the quiet with no agenda and just be present in their own life. Now, I want to be honest with you. This isn't just a man problem. Women are dealing with the same thing. The whole culture is dealing with it. But I'm talking to men today through a man's experience, so let's talk about what it costs us specifically. When I think about the men I have worked with over the past 9 years, and I've sat with a lot of men in a lot of different situations, I see two types who struggle the most with solitude. The first is a man who is grieving. He didn't choose to be alone, a marriage ended, a relationship fell apart. Solitude was handed to him like a punishment, and now the silence isn't peaceful, it's brutal. It's just him and the thing he lost and the thought that keeps coming back at 2 a.m. The second man is the settler. He will take chaos over quiet. He would rather have someone difficult on his arm than sit alone in his house. The silence terrifies him more than dysfunction does, so he stays in relationships that cost him, or he jumps from one to the next. Because being alone means being with himself, and he hasn't figured out how to be there. That's not a bad place to be. Both of these men are avoiding the same thing, they just do it differently. The thing they're avoiding isn't loneliness, it's themselves. And I know this because I was the second man for a long time. I needed someone on my arm to look normal. I wasn't chasing love, I was chasing a reflection. I wanted a woman who made me look like I had it together, like I was okay, like the version of myself I was performing was real. And I spent all of my time managing that appearance and almost none of it actually being present in the relationship. It didn't work. It never works because you can't build something real on a performance. Now, I want to be clear about something before we go further. When I say solitude, I'm not talking about meditation in the way most people picture it. I'm not talking about sitting cross-legged on a mat, breathing in a pattern, trying to control your mind into a particular state. That framing has put a lot of men off the whole idea, and I understand why. It sounds like a practice you have to prepare for, like something that requires equipment. What I'm talking about is different, and it took me a long time to recognize what I had been doing because I didn't have a name for it. It would happen in the shower. I would get in and the water would be hot and something in me would just release. And I would stay in there for 30, 40 minutes sometimes, not thinking about anything in particular, just letting the weight of the day come off. Or I'd be sitting in the living room, no TV, no phone, no nothing on, and I could feel the tension leaving my body, like something that had been gripping me all day slowly letting go. That's solitude. That's what I'm talking about. Solitude doesn't require preparation, it requires surrender. The moment you try to force it, you've already missed it. So the posture that makes it possible is the opposite of effort. It's release. It's bringing nothing and expecting nothing and just letting yourself breathe. Here's what it feels like when it actually happens. There's a decompression. You can feel it move through your body. The shoulders come down, the jaw unclenches, the breathing slows, and then there's this moment where sleep starts to feel like a welcome thought. Not because you're bored, but because your nervous system has finally stopped racing. Most men have never felt that, not because they can't, but because they've never given themselves permission to stop long enough to get there. And here's what happens after the decompression if you stay with it. Clarity. Not the kind of clarity you get from grinding on a problem for 3 hours. The other kind. The kind that arrives when you stop trying to manufacture it. I cannot tell you how many times I've been beating my head against something, a decision, a situation, a relationship challenge, and I have gone around in circle for days. And then I sit down in my living room in the quiet with no intention of solving anything, and something floats up, a thought, a direction, a sense of what the next step is. And I have learned to pay attention to those moments because they're not random and they're not always mine. The solution arrives when I stop forcing the solution. Sometimes I think what I've been calling my wins aren't really my wins. I do the work, I try, I push, but the thing that actually breaks it open happens in the quiet. And I think that might be God working through the spaces I finally made for him. I want to tell you about the most significant moment of solitude in my life. And I want to be upfront. It did not happen in a church. It did not happen during a prayer. I had not read the Bible. I had no framework for God at that point in my life. And what happened before any of that, which is part of why it took me years to understand what it actually was. I had been living with something deeply private for a long time, a struggle with my identity that I had been managing and hiding and trying to resolve on my own terms. And without getting into all the details here, because I've covered that in earlier episodes, and I want this to be about what happened in that moment, not what the struggle was, I had gotten to a place where I thought I knew what the next step was. I thought I was moving towards something. I was sitting in a bathroom. There was a woman there with me. She was sitting on my lap. She was doing my makeup, and she had done this before. This was not unfamiliar territory. And I was sitting there, not praying, not reflecting on anything intentionally, just present in the moment and looking right through her eyes. And I was as surrendered as I have ever been in my life. Not by choice, by exhaustion, by the particular kind of quiet that happens when you run out of ideas and you're not trying anymore. And then this thought hit me. It came in specific words, programmed into my mind, not quite an external voice, but not quite an internal thought either. It was something in between, and it said, "Oh my God, I can't do this anymore." And here's what I want you to understand about that moment. Those words did not come from me. I was not at a breaking point. I was not planning to stop anything. I was not having a crisis. Something outside of me placed those words in me, and that moment they arrived, something that had been gripping me for years, it lost all its power, just like that. I started shaking. I felt clumsy, like I had been transported into a different world, like the ground had shifted under me and I didn't know where I was standing anymore. And for the first time I can remember, I felt completely out of character, like I had been playing someone else for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to be me. And in that moment, I knew that whoever I had been performing, it was over. There was no point to it. I was always going to be the person I was born as, and there was no path forward in the direction I had been going. Now, I didn't say anything to the woman who was there at the time. I got up, I changed how I was going to dress, I walked out, I went to a movie with some other friends that night, feeling completely awkward, completely disoriented, completely different from the person who had walked in. She knew something had happened, she just didn't know what. The days that followed were full of confusion. And I talked about what had happened with someone the next day, not because I understood it, but because I couldn't carry it alone. And I wandered for the next several months trying to figure out what had just occurred. It would take me years into recovery, years into faith, years of working through it with people who had walked similar roads before I fully understood what happened in that bathroom. God showed up before I knew who he was, before I had any theology for it, before I had ever walked into a church with intention. He showed up in the most surrendered moment of my life and did something that no amount of effort, willpower, or planning had been able to do. And he showed up because I was finally quiet enough for him to get in. That is what solitude can do. Not always that dramatic, but that is a category of thing that becomes possible when a man finally stops filling every silence with noise. Now, I want to say something about prayer that might push back against how a lot of us were taught. Most of us were given a model that looks something like this: Dear Lord, here's my list. Amen. And that's not wrong. That's the kind of prayer is real and it matters. But if that's the only kind of prayer you have, you're missing most of the conversation. Because I believe that when we are walking with God, really walking with him, not just checking in occasionally, prayer is not a scheduled event. It's an ongoing conversation. It's happening in the car. It's happening in the shower. It's happening when you sit in your living room at the end of the day and there's nobody there but you in the quiet. That's where he does some of his best work. I want to be careful here because there are a lot of spiritual practices that involve silence and meditation that are not what I'm describing. Some of them are about emptying your mind, controlling your breath toward a particular outcome. and following rules of a particular system. Those require something from you. They require effort and technique and preparation. What I'm describing requires the opposite. It requires letting go of all of that. No technique, no system, no rules, just complete release. Just what comes to you when you stop managing the outcome. It's not about emptying your mind, it's about opening your hands. And when you do that, when you get still enough, surrendering enough, present enough, sometimes what comes isn't your own thinking. Sometimes what floats up is something you didn't manufacture, a direction you didn't plan, a piece that doesn't make sense given your circumstances. That's not meditation in the Eastern sense. That's not mysticism. That's what it looks like to walk with Christ in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. So let me address the pushback because I know it's coming. The most common thing I hear from men when I talk about this is some version of, I don't have time, or I'm not wired that way, or when I tried being alone, it just got dark. On the time objection, I'm not asking you to carve out an hour. I'm talking about sitting in your car in the driveway before you go inside. I'm talking about 10 minutes in the shower. I'm talking about sitting in your living room chair before you reach for the phone. The time is there. What's missing is the permission to use it this way. On the personality objection, I hear you. Some men are wired toward people and activity and noise. Being alone drains them. But here's what I've learned. Solitude doesn't have to be extended to isolation. It can happen in small pockets. The beach with the waves coming in, your truck on a quiet road, a moment between things where you just stop. That counts. But the hardest one, the one I take the most seriously, is the man who says, I tried being alone after my divorce and it went dark. I'm not doing that again. To that man, I want to say, I understand, and I'm not dismissing what happened. But here is what I want you to consider. The pain that came up in the silence was not the silence hurting you. That was the silence finally letting you feel what you had been carrying for a long time without setting it down. That pain was not a sign that solitude is dangerous. It was the beginning of something. You just didn't have anyone to tell you that staying in that room with it is part of the process, not a reason to run. Sometimes solitude is painful before it becomes peaceful, and that's not failure, that's the work. Here's what I know about solitude after 6 years of living alone, not miserably alone, not waiting to be rescued, but genuinely alone and genuinely okay with it. I got there slowly. I used to need someone on my arm to feel like I was acceptable. I used to fill every quiet moment with noise because the quiet made me uncomfortable. And then, over time, through recovery and faith and a lot of honest moments in a lot of quiet rooms, I stopped running. And I found that the man I had been avoiding in the silence was not as bad as I thought. He just needed someone to sit with him for a while. I will tell you honestly, I'm still working on it. There are things I still need to get quiet about. There is still work to do in the still moments. I'm not presenting this as a destination I've fully arrived at. I'm presenting it as a direction, and the direction is worth walking. The bathroom moment I told you about today, I could not have manufactured that. I could not have planned it. I could not have made it happen through effort or willpower or the right combination of spiritual disciplines. It happened because I was finally still enough, finally surrendered enough, finally out of my own way enough. And if God did that in a bathroom before I even knew who he was, I have to believe he is willing to do something in the quiet spaces of your ordinary days too. You just have to give him the room. Here's the one thing I want to leave you with this week. The next time you are beating your head against a problem you cannot solve, and you will know when that moment comes, just stop. Don't try harder. Don't make another list. Don't call someone else to process it again. Go somewhere quiet, your chair, your car, your shower, wherever works for you. Give yourself 20 minutes of a complete release. No agenda, no intention of solving anything. Just breathe. Let the problem float. Don't chase it. Don't fix it. Don't manage it. Just see what comes. You might be surprised what shows up when you finally get out of your own way. Now, if this episode landed for you, please share it. Not on social media necessarily, with one man in your life who you think needs to hear it. That's the most useful thing you can do with this. If you're new here, the Steady Man series is a 50-episode walkthrough what it looks like to build a life of faith, character, and steady manhood. This is episode 35, and every episode builds, so start wherever you are. And hit subscribe if you want to keep walking through this with me. And I'll see you in the next one.